Ohio, it is very, very hot now. So with that, we're going to get started, and we will talk a little today about our topic with mentoring and apprenticeships. So in the chat, if you would like, if you want to put something in there about your name, your organization, what you think about Gen Z in one word, and something you're looking forward to this summer. I am looking forward to taking my nieces and nephews to Scene 75 next week. Luckily, it is an indoor amusement park, not an outdoor one, so I won't be dependent on the weather. And Gen Z, in one word, I think I would say dynamic. They're pretty dynamic people. So that's my one word. So feel free to put that all in the chat for us. Our agenda today, we're going to talk a little about who is Gen Z in the workplace, and then mentoring and what are some of our best practices with mentoring. First of all, a little about the project that Kim and Corey and I represent. We are here today representing the Supply Chain Automation Workforce Hub. We are a one-stop shop for helping with supply chain automation workforce challenges, specifically in the world of registered apprenticeship. So we're doing things like conducting outreach and education to try to let folks know about apprenticeship. We have a technical assistance fund where we can offer some financial incentives for registered apprenticeship. We're supporting expansion and also establishment of new registered apprenticeship programs. And then we're also doing trainings like we're doing here today. So we have a wide variety of functions we can help with. The best part about us is our services are available at no cost because we are a Department of Labor intermediary, so our services cost you nothing. We are fortunate that we have been able to partner with organizations like RCCA to extend our reach. We do a lot of work with community colleges, so those are one of our top educational institutions that we're working with. We're also doing outreach to employers and trying to help employers with things like developing standards, helping educational institutions develop curriculum. So we're really all about those apprenticeships and how we either expand and modify existing programs or how we stand up new types of programs. We also do a lot of outreach with things like accelerators, where we're trying to let community-based organizations know who we are and what we do, and also helping with that registered apprenticeship and awareness. And thank you all for participating in the chat. I see some of that. So who is Gen Z? That's what I'm going to talk about. They are digital natives. They've grown up with technology, so they're very used to it. Just talked a little before the webinar started about the pandemic and how the pandemic has impacted them. On the meeting I was on prior to this, we were talking about some of the social skills and how that has been a bit stunted because they grew up over Zoom. They didn't necessarily have some of those interactions in person. The population growth, they are a large generation. They also are very civically engaged. When we look at these statistics, their portion in the workforce is growing. So they are a growing part of our workforce. The organizations that they are hiring Gen Z are also starting to use AI. So Gen Z is going to be shaped by AI. They are definitely more comfortable with sensitive topics like compensation on the job than some of us might be. The youngest generation of Gen Z is starting to be ready to be leaders in the workplace. They are very interested in mentoring. Our topic for the day, as you see there, 83% say that a mentor is critical to their career. However, only 52% of them actually report having a mentor. They want to work for companies that are outspoken on social issues, and they're very open to feedback. We have a summer intern this summer at my firm, and we found that he really likes to have a lot of feedback. He likes to have the interaction. Although he's a remote employee, we've been spending a lot of time kind of working with him over Zoom and actually looking at what his interests are. They really want to be met where they are and have help with their interests. So our intern is very interested in entrepreneurship. So we've encouraged him to put down a few questions about entrepreneurship that he can ask to some of our connections and also ask to us. They will leave a job if they are unable to get along with their managers. So again, that's where that mentoring comes in as being really critical to help them be successful on the job. Some of these quotes from Gen Z, I love these quotes because this is actual quotes from Gen Z from a recent report talking about how they get experience. they feel as though they need experience, they need a chance. And I don't know if you've seen it, but the entry level job market right now is pretty tough. So they're really looking for the chance and opportunities. They're looking for that purpose, as we see down in the left hand corner. They want purpose on the job. They want to know why they're there, how their work is meaningful. And they also have that belief that TikTok influencers are their friends. So social media has rewired a little bit the way they think and the way that they value things and what their ideas of success are and what that looks like. And then also, they have a different view on life in general. They are really looking for that work life balance. Gen Z in the workplace. 80% of Gen Z employees are facing burnout. So there's a huge emphasis with this generation on mental health. They're also looking for that job fulfillment and they like flexibility on the job. I just heard from a company the other day that has 6 generations in their workplace about one of the bullet points on this slide, and that's the different communication styles. They're finding a lot of clashes occurring, just like this slide says, because they have baby boomers on the job, and then they also have Gen Z on the job, and they're finding that the Gen Z does want to do this texting, whereas the baby boomers want to have those in-person interactions. So we're increasingly hearing from companies about those different communication styles, and mentoring can be a great way to bridge that gap by pairing up workers of different generations. Also, they need a lot of feedback, but they may lack some of the soft skills, such as communication, time management, prioritization of work, or being organized on the job. Again, I just touched on this, but that multi generational workplace and how that looks. Again, mentoring is a great opportunity to be able to take some of the expertise of your veteran employees, pair them up with a younger employee, and really have some of that knowledge transfer and collaboration going on. It can also be a great way to help older workers learn new skills and learn new perspectives from that younger worker. I think also all employees these days are looking for that meaningful work that definitely is involved with their values, especially Gen Z. So we really want to be thinking about what are our values in the workplace and how do we bring those values into the workplace and how do we also communicate effectively about those. And mentoring can also be a great way to promote that employee value and make employees feel as though they're valued and the company is investing in them. What is Gen Z looking for on the job? This slide compares a little bit about Gen Z versus millennials. And what we see here is Gen Z workers and millennials as well are looking for those opportunities to progress and advance in their careers. Mentoring again can be a great way to help them achieve that advancement that they're looking for. They're also looking for learning and development opportunities. Again, mentoring is a great way to help fill that need that they have for learning and development opportunities. Reasons that they left down on the bottom. They didn't see the learning and development opportunities. They didn't see that there were career advancement opportunities, and they didn't necessarily feel that the job was healthy for them in the sense of mental health. So, that mental health, again, is also very, very important, as is the learning and development opportunities and the advancement opportunities. And again, we see that purpose. They're looking for that purpose, that fulfillment on the job. Some keys to developing those emerging leaders of Gen Z. And we see that bottom one. And we're going to be transitioning over to that with Corey and Kim and really talking about how do we implement a good mentorship program and what does that look like? That's one of the top ways we can develop some of this emerging talent that we see with Gen Z. Also, focusing on development of those skills, things like communication, things like conflict resolution, things like giving feedback and receiving feedback. So, really investing in that leadership growth. And that's where a mentor can also be helpful and encouraging those stretch projects. And again, a mentor is a great fit with those stretch projects. If we place someone in a stretch project, knowing that they have that mentor to rely on can be really, really helpful. And mentorship in the area of Gen Z, they're looking for authenticity. They're looking for that adaptation. They want personal connections. They want someone who brings that whole person to work. So they don't want to see that work life kind of bucketed away from that personal life. They want to see the whole person coming to work. They're also looking for those mentors who listen, engage, and help them grow. And they're looking for mentors that can leverage that technology. They also want authenticity. They're used to seeing authenticity due to social media. So they're really looking for those authentic mentors. They want to hear about mistakes, not just about successes. And with that, Corey, I think I'm transitioning over to you to talk a little about a deep dive into mentorship. Thank you, everyone.
Sounds good. And thank you, Dorinda. I don't know if it's appropriate to say that someone can conduct a webinar heroically. Like, I don't know if that's using but if anyone has ever done a heroic webinar presentation with your voice, the voice the way it is, that was amazing. Thank you so much for that, and for really setting the stage with some great information here. And I don't think I have slide control, so if we can just jump to the next slide, that'd be great. Dorinda, thank you for that. Um, so this is great, and you'll be meeting Dr. Harris, our good friend Kimberly Harris, in a moment. But this is absolutely a great Dr. Harris graphic here, because it involves trees and it involves growth and roots and strength, but also the possibilities of what happens when we reach out into the unknown here. We don't need to go through these step by step, but when we think about what mentorship means and what is important to mentorship, we can look at a couple of these that I think are really important. Like, look at on the most basic level, accessibility and open communication, right? We want everyone to have access to this resource. We want everyone to be able to access mentorship, to have this as part of what they're going to be able to get involved with. Once they're in that mentorship, we want open communication. As Dorinda was saying, this is, mentorship is not about we're going to do a PowerPoint presentation and listen, kids, sit down. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen now. No, this is about a two-way, very open, very honest, very real kind of communication. And then, by the way, that should be true of all mentorship. This isn't a special part of mentorship for Gen Z. Mentorship should be that for everyone. But when we think about an idea like accessibility, I had the privilege of doing a lot of work in the disability space, and we kind of think of accessibility on two levels. On the one hand, there's the question of, can someone get through the door? Can I get through the door? Can I access this printed material, or this computer program, or this website? Can I have access to it on the most basic level? There's another level too, right? Of welcomeness. Okay, I made it through the door. Do I actually feel like you wanted me here now that I'm here? Do I actually feel welcome? Do I actually feel wanted in this space? And by space, of course, I mean physical space, virtual space, program space, whatever we mean by that. And I think particularly when we're talking about mentorship, we always have to be thinking, of course, yes, the most basic necessity is access. Beyond that, there's truly a sense of welcomeness and connection, engagement, as our slide says here, that is so important. Often, when we look at adaptability and flexibility, that's going to require some adaptability and flexibility on our parts, right? Because if mentorship has to be such a unique exchange based on who the two people are that are involved, of course, it's going to be different every time, and we've got to be prepared for that. In fact, if we're not prepared for that, if we don't have that capacity to let this tree grow where it will, to let this being emerge into what it wants to be, emerge into what it can be, then of course it's never going to be as successful as it could possibly be. And all of that requires, if we look at some of our last pieces here, authenticity, a holistic guidance, role modeling. All of that entails not only honesty, not only openness, not only the notion that if I'm a mentor, I'm not going to come in and tell you, hey, these are the 10 things I did that made me the most successful guy you're ever going to meet. No, I'm going to talk about my successes and my struggles and my fears and my hopes. I'm going to talk about all those things in whatever way the mentee is most interested in. I'm going to be myself in an absolutely holistic way, because this is obviously, if we're just trying to teach someone technical skills, we have different ways of going about that. Yeah, maybe we can do that in mentorship, but it's about a lot more than that. It's about what we call the whole person. It's about my work skills, my soft skills. The way that I interact with folks in the office. It's about my hobbies. It's about my interests. It's about why do I get up in the morning and do this in the first place? Why do I care? Am I just here for a paycheck? Am I here because this business is what drives me? All of that matters, right? That entire really being able to be all of who I am as both a mentor and a mentee is extremely important. And of course, doing that in a very open and authentic kind of way, and providing the space for that. Of course, providing the space for that, providing the guidance for that. That's what we're here for, right? That's what we as the facilitators in the background are all about. I think we can jump to the next slide, please. And we can just jump one more. We can just keep going right into the content. So we begin with what are our goals? Just really rooting this, grounding this. I'm going to keep the tree thing going as best I can, Kim. So we can just we'll be in an arboretum by the time we're done here. We want to, when we're thinking about what we're doing in this process, what are our goals? How are we approaching this? We always come back to what are we trying to accomplish? And that in turn really depends a lot on the mentee rather, who they are, what their needs are. And this is going to dictate all these pieces. Our communication. How are we communicating? As Dorinda was talking about, maybe a lot of us are thinking, hey, I want to do in-person meetings at most. Maybe we can do a Zoom connection, but really, myself as someone who is not at all Gen Z. I certainly do not qualify as a Gen Z person. Of course, I'm always thinking I want at least a phone call or a Zoom, or ideally I want to be in person. Other folks might have no expectation of that. That might not be what they want. And we're going to, of course, adapt to that, just as we will also ask the mentee to adapt to us a little bit too, right? There might be a value in saying, okay, yeah, we can do some of this virtually, but we're going to do some of this in person as well, because that's an important piece. This is about meeting in the middle between these two folks who are going to be involved here. Of course, our expectations. How frequently do I think I'm going to be meeting with someone as a mentor, as a mentee? What kind of topics are we going to cover? What kind of conversations are we going to have? What are the expectations for kind of reporting about what I'm doing, talking to others in the program about how did that session go? What's happening here? What do I hope to gain from this? Am I looking to build up my soft skills? Am I looking to build up my connections? Am I just looking for someone to help me navigate this new space that I'm in? All of that, of course, is very important. And then finally, we can ask ourselves, both as individuals, as a mentee, what am I struggling with the most? What do I really need assistance with? Even ourselves as an overall program, what do we most need to have and to understand as a part of this? And are we going to answer that via assessments, either on an individual or a programmatic level, or we're going to answer that via a workshop or a webinar to kind of be informing the different folks we have around us? How are we going to answer some of these things? Again, always beginning with defining all of this based on what are we trying to accomplish? What are the goals of this process on an institutional level, and then on an individual level as far as both the mentor and the mentee are concerned? And we can jump right to that next slide, please. Um, so, of course, this starts with a matching process, and here's where this is again where we have to first ask ourselves, what are the goals of this process? What are we trying to accomplish? Because we might immediately be thinking, if we're talking about someone in a Gen Z situation, well, we might immediately be thinking like, well, you know what? We love to match people based on their peer identity, based on who they are. So if someone's in Gen Z, maybe we'll find someone else who's maybe a year or two older. They've been working in this space for a year or two. Fundamentally, they're someone with a similar kind of perspective. And we might even go further than that. Of course, there are all kinds of other identity features. We might say, okay, we've got two Gen Z military veterans here, and we're going to connect them based on that. Or we've got two folks who have experienced trauma or homelessness or incarceration, or whose goals are X, Y, and Z, whatever they are. We might be looking for all these areas of similarity by which to say, okay, here's this great match that we can make. However, this again is why we always need to ask ourselves, what are our goals in this situation? If we can briefly put ourselves into, as I say, a completely fantastical situation and say, okay, Corey is the mentee, Corey is the Gen Z mentee, Kim's going to be his mentor. Uh, or as we're thinking about matching Corey with a mentee, is Corey looking for someone who can really identify with where he's at in his process, or is he looking for someone who's going to give a very different perspective and say, no, Corey, here's someone who's been in this process in this space much longer and can offer that kind of more that longer term perspective that might be helpful. So as a Gen Z person, I might benefit from being connected with someone who's been in this field for 30 years. That's quite possible. It all depends on what my goals are. So that's where we really set this up, as we really talk about what are we trying to accomplish? What does this mentor need? What does this process need? And that's going to guide us into this matching. And then that's going to, in turn, in this kind of ongoing upward cycle that mentorship really should be, that leads us to sort of set our next set of goals. And there are two kinds of goals, and we're going to talk about those, and we can actually jump to the next slide. We've got our do goals and then our be goals. Now, our do goals, those are going to be a little more straightforward, right? Those are a little more short term. They're observable. Those are things which they should be very easy to measure. They're going to probably relate to very specific career related outcomes. Is there a specific skill that I need to learn? Is there a specific comfort level that, like, if I say, I just don't know how to, send an email to everyone in the office and have it be the appropriate tone. I don't know how to build relationships with folks because I'm used to a very personal, very informal kind of approach. But this isn't a very informal kind of setting we're in here. So how do I adapt to that? All of those things are probably pretty immediate, pretty straightforward, pretty clearly measurable do goals. We have this other category over here of this somewhat more intricate, somewhat less tangible, somewhat less visible being goals, these be goals. They're related to basically who it is that I want to be, who it is, how I want to be perceived, how I want to exist in this working space that I'm in, right? This is going to also be related to, we talked before about the whole person. So not just Corey, who's got a specific set of skills in the workplace, not just Corey and his hard skills and soft skills, also Corey and his hobbies and interests, Corey and his social background, Corey and his family. Like, we're talking about the entire comprehensive creature that is all of Corey, all at once, right? And that's what these goals are going to be oriented in. Who is it I'm trying to be? Where do I want to go? And who is it I want to be within this career that I'm building, right? And of course, this is going to require both more steps to cultivate, because this is, there's nothing clear about this. This is not something we can just hand someone a piece of paper and tell them, okay, read this over, and this will tell you, Corey, this will tell you who you're supposed to be. This will tell you how you're supposed to exist in your career from this point forward. No, of course not, right? It's much more, as we say, invisible, intangible. So it's going to take longer to get to. It's going to take longer to cultivate. And of course, it's going to be harder. It's going to take longer for us to measure it as well, to really understand what this means. And that's not going to be an easy process, but luckily we're going to have Dr. Harris talk all about that. So we don't even need to worry about that. She's going to get that all handled for us. But in the meantime, we can jump to the next slide, please. So all of this, it's about defining without limiting the goals and the scope of this relationship. So one of the most important things about everything in this space, whether we're talking about workforce development or education or mentorship or registered apprenticeship, all of those things, compared to a lot of the stuff we do in the public space, that's so much about like, okay, we're going to provide this service and the person receiving the service is going to kind of sit back and the service is just going to almost happen to them. These things aren't like that, right? This needs the involvement and the motivation and the direction of the folks that we're serving in this process. And the way we achieve that, the way we achieve real engagement and the real promise of me saying, I'm going to invest myself in this as a mentee, as a career seeker, as a student, and I'm going to invest myself and let this go as far as it can. Well, the way we do that again is by creating a process where we are not limiting where we can possibly go with this. So we want to create a space, just like well, hey, we'll stick with the agricultural stuff, just like a garden, right? A garden is the space in which we set things to grow. The garden doesn't define really how tall something's going to be. It doesn't define what we're going to grow. It's just the space in which we do it. And it's the space that we can cultivate that makes things grow that much better, particularly when we know exactly what it is we want to grow within that. So we want both the mentor and the mentee to claim ownership, claim agency, claim a sense of leadership in this process and say, hey, I'm going to invest myself to make this what it can be. Not in the sense of saying, I'm the mentor, I'm going to take this over. But I'm the mentor. I'm 50% of this process here, along with the mentee, who's the other 50%. I'm going to put myself in this. I'm going to just be who I am. I'm going to do my best with this and really invest in it. And when I've got that kind of commitment and I feel safe in making that kind of commitment, that's where this really gets to go in a direction that we might not have anticipated, where we really see something growing that we might not have been able to see coming in the first place. An important thing here to remember. I think if we were talking, if we were doing this webinar about serving veterans in rural community colleges and incorporate and making sure they're a part of our classroom. And I said, hey, we're working with Shauna. She's a 20-year veteran. She's just coming out and she's looking to get into this apprenticeship, looking to get into a mentorship. I think none of us would think twice about the idea that, of course, we want Shauna to be invested and we want her leadership and we want her driving this process forward. I think we sometimes mistake ourselves, particularly those of us who are a little bit further from Gen Z than we might like to admit. Sometimes we forget that this applies just as much to Gen Z. We need a 20-year-old and 18-year-old mentee to be just as invested, investing just as much of their own leadership perspective in this as we would want from anyone else. And we want to be supporting that and driving that in exactly the same way we would in any other situation. And this, again, is where we want to leverage our evaluation and assessment process to make sure that this is going where we want it to go. Not just that, we mentioned our competency milestones here, but all the different pieces. We want to see where this growth is going and see what we're achieving with it. And we can jump to the next slide, please. And then finally, this is just coming back to that notion of expectations before I think I hand this over to Kim. We want everyone on the same page here. This is about that, creating that space, creating that garden space in which we know things will grow well. We want all of our expectations on the table. Anything that we have from the program, as the program folks, of course, we want that out there. Do we have expectations for how frequently folks meet, how they meet, when they meet, what they talk about, what they're doing? We want to put all that out there. We want to hear from the mentor and the mentee in every case. What are their expectations? We want to talk about that. We want that on the table. We want both the mentor and the mentee to have the same idea in their head when they're thinking about what their respective roles in this process are. When they're thinking about what the benefit, what they're going to get out of this, what their goals are. Of course, we want all of that on the table. How long do we imagine this relationship is going to last? Do we dictate that, hey, this is going to be this is going to go on for the semester or for the academic year or for the calendar year or for 6 months, whatever it is, we lay that out from a program perspective. And to be perfectly honest, we hope that when we hit that academic year mark and we say, okay, this process is now technically over, we hope folks say, well, I don't care, I'm going to keep this relationship going because that's what it means to grow in whatever direction we want it to. But nonetheless, of course, expectations being the baseline that we're working from, we communicate those from the get-go. Means of communication, the media we're using, all of those things. But of course, particularly on an expectation level, on a goal level. What is the mentor? What is the mentee hoping to get out of this? What are they hoping to achieve? And what are they imagining themselves committing to this process? And do we all have kind of the same shared view of that from the outset? Because again, that's that foundation, that's tending the garden and ensuring that as we move forward, what we plant in it is going to grow organically. But I believe that is what we've got from me. Excuse me, my voice is cracking a little bit there, but we can jump to the next slide and I will hand things over to my wonderful colleague, Dr. Kimberly Harris.
Thank you so much, Corey. I really appreciate it. And if you'll see, I guess in a second or two, Corey and I have this habit I think that we've adopted of picking up on each other's metaphors. So I loved, the imagery that Corey crafted, talking about, cultivating the soil, having this garden, right? And with conditions conducive for the things that you want to bloom, and and not having weeds, right? We want to keep those weeds down. So when we think about the evaluation process, what is that all about? That is where we kind of really get into the tending of the soil, right? It's not just enough to identify great bulbs and seeds and whatever and have the great soil. It's also, what are we doing all along the way to make sure that the harvest that we're looking to bloom actually blooms, and we're not planting, I don't know, tulips or cucumbers or what have you, and we get some other thing popping up that we never anticipated. So I'm gonna try to do good service to Corey, to that vivid metaphor, which I think is so on point, cultivating that soil and not beat it to death. But I just wanted to draw forth and really emphasize the fact that when we think about evaluation, that's really what we're doing. It's what do we do all along the way to ensure, just as it says in that subtitle, that the intent is aligned with the outcomes. And with that being said, could we advance to the next slide? Thank you so much. So as we think about, aligning intent with outcomes, cultivating that soil so that we get the outcomes that we want. And outcomes can be, 3 to 5 years, 5 to 7 years. And ultimately we want outcomes that are transformational, right? We really want outcomes that transform the landscape, the place and space where this work is being done, where these initiatives are being done. So when we think about a good program evaluation, and as you see here on the screen, we really emphasize the fact that good program evaluation occurs before really the program begins. Good program evaluation really begins in the ideation and conceptualization phase, just as of the program itself. Because what we want to ensure is that those needs, those issues that a particular initiative or program are looking to address can be addressed. And sometimes along that way, if you will, you want a good thought partner alongside you to say, hey, I know you're thinking about this, but have you thought about the impact or the spillover effect that this particular initiative could have on this particular thing, or a particular element of an initiative could have on a particular thing? Or a great question that I always get from clients at Aduca is, how do we kind of cancel out the noise? And how can we truly be clear on the initiatives, the impact, the activities, if you will, that we're developing and we are rolling out really did the thing that we said that they would do, and it really wasn't something else that got in the way. So how do we keep the noise out and really keep our eye on the actual pathway from the conceptualization to the implementation to the actual outputs and ultimately the outcomes that come from that? And basically, that we didn't get a bunch of weeds growing in our plant bed. Still going to borrow from that metaphor because I really love it. And that's where that planning comes into place, right? And I loved what Corey and Dorinda talked about, is that when we are talking about Gen Zers and when we're talking about the workplace and we're talking about, these different generations that are defined by, not only, the time span in which they are born, but also what defines, as we know, a generation, are what are the national and international, these phenomena, these events that really put their thumbprint on a generation. When we talk about and think about Gen Zers and their relationship to learning, that plasticity that we tend to think about, how nimble they are in embracing different types of technology, how in as much as they crave that individual interaction and a certain level of intimacy and intentionality, they also are very comfortable with communicating in a distal way via text, right? So, how do we reconcile those things that are very unique to a generation, right? And so, when we think about those things and then think about embedding that culture in workplace culture, that is, in mixing up with all other with different generations coming together, your millennials, your baby boomers, your whomever else, and also now with the coming into the workplace of the alpha generation, right? How do all these different, workers get in the mix? And if the ultimate goal is to ensure that all of these workers can come, show up who they are, and bring forth their best thoughts, their best ideas, and ultimately their best productivity to help with going concern and all of the things that we care about from the position of the employer and the organization. How can we be responsive to who folks are, to how they're showing up, and what that might mean in terms of how do we tailor and tweak the mentorship experience and program? So as we're thinking about these big questions, we have to break them down into actionable things, right? That we often call in the evaluation world these indicators. So yes, there are these organizational goals that we want all of our team members to help us to meet. Ultimately, we want productivity, whether we're in the business of a service or producing something or some combination. We want to be productive. We want to be the best in that, rightfully so. And we want every team member to be able to come and to contribute to that ultimate goal. And as we break that goal down, there are going to be departmental goals, division goals, goals based upon the type of job that you hold and the expectations that come with that job. So as we think about apprentices and we think about Gen Zers and we think about what do they need, what do they require, what are they basically calling for or expecting in the workplace, we also have to think about all of the different types of mentorship possibilities that exist, and then how do we craft an evaluation plan that can be responsive to that and be reflective of that. And that once again goes to this thinking about, when do we begin the planning? When do we begin the mapping out? We really ideally want to do that alongside the program design. So what does that look like, before we advance to the next slide? Just to linger for a quick moment, what does or what could that look like? That could very much look like in the beginning of the development of a mentorship program, also really getting a sense of who are the stakeholders, right? If we're talking about mentorship programs that are purposed to help Gen Zers flourish, thrive, be productive, capitalize, optimize on who they are and how they show up and all of the things that make them unique and all of the wealth, of assets and gems that those characteristics also bring. We need to be thinking about, these programs that we're creating, that are crafted to help from a mentorship perspective. How will we determine what is good enough? How will we determine when we've, not only hit the mark, but surpassed the mark? How do we measure these initiatives, these elements of these mentorship programs? So we really do need to be thinking about then the voices, the lived experiences, as Corey mentioned and talked about so eloquently, the expectations of these Gen Zers, of the Gen Zers. And not only them, right? Also the expectations of those who will be interfacing and interacting with them as their mentors. What type of mentorship will they need? All of those things definitely need to be thought about, almost if you will, on a level playing field or happening parallel, because we want to make sure that the design and the evaluation are really serving and meeting the purpose of the program that it is crafted to evaluate and measure. Could we advance to the next slide? Thank you so much. So from that standpoint, Evaluation should explore specific program elements and consider the purpose in the overall program. So what does that mean? And we broke that down, and I'd love to just stay here a little longer, thinking about talking about what is the purpose of the mentorship? What particular element in the in the workplace is this mentorship relationship or program or initiative looking to address? Is it helping the mentee to integrate more seamlessly or effectively into the shop floor or into the department? Is it really looking to teach them a particular or help them to perfect or fine tune a particular task or element of their overall job description? Is it looking to do all of those things? Is it really helping them to be able to interact more impactfully and effectively with clients? Is it looking to help them with their soft skills? Because as we talked about, we're talking about a generation of workers who came of age, for a lot of them, for the most part, in a more distal environment, right? Where, communicating via text or shorthand with emojis and three letters for, it took me a minute to understand that, SMH was shaking my head. And I remember having some conversations with, some of the Gen Zers in my family, and these shorthand texts that I would get. And I'm like, what is this, right? So, what are the elements? What are the things that we're looking to assist, support, teach, and maybe in some ways even transform? We need to be clear on what those things are, and therefore we need to think about that and think about the particular elements or facets of the job, from actually tasks to the soft skills, or some combination of them all. What are the particular things that we are anticipating, needing, wanting the mentorship initiative program experience to address? And then there needs to be some intentionality, or a lot of intentionality, around, okay, if these are the things that we're looking to address, how will we know when those things have been addressed? So the other way in which the evaluation process can be a handy tool, whether it be the external evaluation or good internal evaluation. And I'm happy to talk with anybody more about that if you are, curious about the distinction and how they could be used. But in either case, what is imperative is to identify through what we call indicators. What is the thing? Yes, we are talking about increased productivity, or more impactful and productive interaction with with clientele, or maybe more interpersonal, improved interpersonal relationships, or whatever those goals and objectives are. What specific things, what indicators, what will indicate for us in any particular place and space, oh, that we've met that mark, right? So when we're thinking about the design and the evaluation, we want to think about those specific program elements so that we can identify equally specific program indicators to let us know that we have gotten there, or how far away we are from getting there. Or sometimes a lovely surprise, have we surpassed it, right? Have we done such a great job that we have not only met, but we surpassed that? And then the beauty of the evaluation process is that it helps us to then, replicate, scale, repeat, show, and we then are able to grow through our learning. So in each of those facets, evaluation can be so important. Could we advance to the next slide? So as we're thinking about this, thinking about the specificity of the programmatic objectives, and then being equally specific around the indicators that we develop in service to that. One example, just to kind of draw it home, thinking about, let's say a mentorship looking to increase classroom success and resiliency, and really wanting to make sure that it correlates to, let's say, grade improvement or student retention or passing rates. Let's think about maybe some of the trades jobs. So even some of I worked on an apprenticeship program where it was really all about training the next generation of virtual mainframe programmers, right? And so there are definitely specific, thinking of mainframes, the backbone of commerce in our country and really in our world. Of course, there are going to be specific things that need to be demonstrated that individuals who are in this particular area, in terms of apprenticeship and looking to master this, have to make sure that they're able to consistently demonstrate time and again. But also equally important is going to be in that process, because when we think about mainframe and think about the demographics of folks in that space, we're talking about folks who are at an age and a walk in their life where they're sunsetting, they're retiring, they're looking to do other amazing things. So then, okay, who will be those that take their place? So with the work that we were doing, working with that next wave, some of them were millennials, a few of them were Gen Zers who were more new to this sector, new to this industry, and thinking about what does that training need to look like? Yes, there are specific things that they need to be able to do, but how do we ensure that all of that richness, all of that wealth of experience is conveyed, and that we cultivate or that we help through the mentorship process cultivate and shore up an environment, right, where trainees feel comfortable, basically admitting, hey, this particular thing I didn't quite get, that they felt safe to be vulnerable without being judged, right? But then how do we turn that type of a need that definitely has to be there, right? Making sure that you can be transparent and share without being judged. How does that translate into an indicator that we can measure? Right. So do we need to build in many opportunities to demonstrate through test and retest and measure that and measure gains over time? Do we want a lot of self-reports? Do we want a combination of both? All of those are possibilities that are within our toolkit. But for us to be clear on which ones make sense and on which ones are most appropriate, we need to be equally clear on the objectives of the program. Or do we mainly care about demonstrating and understanding and execution? Do we care about being able to have basically what we call the trainer and some near peer mentoring as well? So not only master it, but demonstrate that you can do a particular task and then teach that task to others. Is that important? Is it one of those things, some of those things, all of those things? And depending on the answer, will then determine the types of indicators that then we will co-create. And that is a word that I really love because it's really not the evaluator, whether internal or external, doing it in a silo. It is really about the evaluator working and walking alongside and saying, okay, let us do this together because you need to understand, how the sausage is made. And then you need to understand when you might need to switch the ingredients, right? You need an approach, a design that is responsive to the realities of the job, that are responsive to the realities of the program that it is looking to measure and serve. So a lot of these things are things that we need to be mindful of. Just as you see in the questions that we have here in this example, is it enough to just say resiliency, or do we need a definition, an operationalization of resiliency that is contextually relevant for the workshop floor or the office space that we're in? And typically the answer is yes, right? Because what resiliency might look like in one space may be slightly or drastically different than what it might look like in another. The through line being that, when we think of resiliency, we're thinking of what stick-to-itness. We're thinking of some attitudinal things that are indicators of one that's willing to kind of go at it and go through it and work through it. So all of those are different things that we need to be thinking about, but the specifics of the definition and how we move through it are going to be highly contextual. Next slide, please. So a few more examples just to kind of drive home this alignment, if you will, between the program and the evaluation itself. So with this particular slide, looking at, a hypothetical where we have veteran participants in a STEM registered apprenticeship program who are paired with professionals in that field. And, in thinking about, some of the things that would be important for us to consider, like, as we're thinking about indicators and assessment and measuring and evaluation, it's going to be just as important for us to think about the students and the mentees and their level of comfort as we think about the mentors and their level of comfort. When we're thinking about mentorships, and Corey talked about some of those elements, right, that really must be at the forefront. Making sure that we clearly articulate expectations, that we think about, kind of each other's respective, lived experience, so that we can think about alignment and fit and all of the other things. We have to also be mindful of the fact that both parties have to be comfortable being candid, being honest, knowing that they can be vulnerable, that there's going to be some bilateral teaching, right? Because at some point there are going to be some windows of knowing that the mentee is going to reveal to the mentor. So there has to be that level of comfort. There has to be this ability to consistently communicate clearly so that learning can take place in an unencumbered environment and space. Could we advance to the next slide? And also another thing to think about too, as we think about a mentorship program, evaluating a mentorship program, learning and the takeaways from a mentorship program are also too the elements of preparation. So if we're thinking about a trauma-informed approach, not only is it enough to be a good mentor and have that experience or really be what we say have the appetite and the skill to execute, there may be some training, right? So mentors, it would be great if every situation would allow for it, but definitely where needed, having mentors trained on trauma-informed approaches, to avoid re-traumatizing a mentee, to ensure that you can cultivate some agency and personal control, to make sure that you can model and share about different coping methods, and to encourage, and build more resiliency for a mentee. And so when you're thinking about those elements, and if there's that need for that, there also needs to be a way to measure the efficacy of the training in those particular elements, if those elements matter. So the main thing that we definitely want to drive home is that just as we think about the program and what's needed for the program and the granularity of that, what are the outcomes that that program is looking to realize through its existence, and how it's executed, we have to be equally mindful of the evaluation techniques and design that will assess and measure the effectiveness of that program. Next slide, please. Oh, I think we're at the end of our slide deck there, but basically just wanting to emphasize that parallel, that ensuring that there's that alignment. And with that, I will toss it back to Dorinda for any question, to field any questions. And we want to be fully sympathetic of the challenge that Dorinda has faced, so heroic in her carrying out that first third of the presentation. So Dorinda, if you need us to jump in, Corey and I would be happy to run and assist.
Thank you, Kim and Corey. And thank you, Chris, for this opportunity. Does anybody have any questions? I actually have one, Kim and Corey, that I get quite a bit, which is, would you say the top 3 best practices are for a mentoring program that you have seen? I hear that one pretty frequently from people.
Well, I am happy to jump in, and then Corey, I'll be quick and leave some space for you. I think that some of the best practices, and definitely the top three, I would say the top two that I have always seen that have resulted in in a positive way, mentorship programs is definitely inclusion. And what we mean by that is including the stakeholders in the development, because it's really important. There are going to be these overarching goals. Mentorship is for a purpose, whether it's personal, career, some combination. It is to help that mentee to grow in certain ways. But the specificity of that and some of that how needs to be determined by the mentee themselves. So there's that inclusion component of that. We want to incorporate stakeholder voice in that development and that design. And then the other part of that definitely an amazing takeaway is the level and the type of matching. I've seen matching done in several different ways. Some, initiatives that I've worked with have used, personality indicators and matched along those. And some of those have been and a lot of those have been super phenomenal in terms of just the magic sauce of that particular assessment and matching through different personality indicators. But I would definitely say inclusion and compatibility, however you're measuring and getting to what compatibility looks like and is, are two key ones there. I'll throw it over to you, Corey.
Well, yeah, you did two. Our math is going to be off here. You asked for three, and we're both going to give you two, but that's all right. We're human services folks, not physicists here. What do we care? Actually, the two things I would emphasize the most. Tim mentioned it briefly previously. The giving mentors a fundamental understanding of trauma-informed services and what that means in terms of just how we engage with someone, make someone feel safe, make someone feel connected, make someone feel in control and represented. Extremely important. And it's not, you don't need to do the PhD level. I'm talking, you can do an hour-long kind of info session, but time very well spent. I would say on that same level, universal design for learning, which is basically the idea of we all learn in different ways, some by doing, some by hearing, some by teaching, some by speaking, whatever it is. Obviously, those are our communication preferences. Those are our learning preferences. That's how we take new information in. So in addition to the pieces Kim was talking about, I want a mentor to understand that so that they know, like, if we communicate in different ways, we can still bridge that by understanding what those different ways are, how they can interact.
Thank you both. Anybody else? Any questions?
Looks like we're at the end of the hour. I want to thank the three of you for taking the time to share this information with us and for everyone to attend. And just one plug for everyone here: we're having our fall conference in Union, Missouri this September. So I hope to see you all there. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone.
Take care,
Bye, everybody.
everyone. Thank you.